Hi, it's Will from stormthecastle.com, and here on YouTube you know me as Epic Fantasy, and this is my latest tutorial. This is a mead making video. I haven't done one in a while, so I thought I'd do one because I have some good information to share with you. This video is how to get more fruit flavor out of your mead. You know, mead's a little bit tricky. You can put fruit in there and let it sit and ferment for weeks, and at the end of it all said and done, you get just a hint of fruit. So, yeah, it's a funny thing because you're not cooking it, it's kind of just soaking. So, here in this video, I have a series of really good tips on how to get more flavor out of your fruit when you're making mead. Dioramas, origami, catapults, and trebuchets, telescopes, terrariums, bonsai trees, and paper games, swords and shields, and real blacksmithing, Melomel animation. I teach the art of real creation. Stormthecastle.com. Let's make something. Alright, so let's take a look. I'm going to use 3 pounds of honey for this, and these are each 24 ounces, which is 1.5 pounds net weight. That's a thing, you know, sometimes it's confusing, liquid volume and net weight, but the net weight here is 1.5 pounds, 16 ounces per pound. So I have 3 pounds, and I wanted to show you when you're making a fruit flavored mead or a melomel, right? It's preferable that you use something called clover honey. And there's a lot of different types of honeys, and they're all very wonderful, and they all have their characteristics. And a very common honey is wildflower honey. And the bees harvest from a whole variety of different types of, you know, plants and flowers for wildflower. But with clover honey, there's a certain percentage that they use just clover. And what that does is that makes a very light colored honey and a very light flavored honey. And we want a light flavored honey, we want a clover honey for using fruit, so we get more of the fruit flavor and less of the honey flavor. So if you can, go with the clover honey. And let me just give you a couple more tips here. Notice this one here is unpasteurized, 100% all natural, pure, raw honey. Unpasteurized and unfiltered. So look for those things if you can, the unpasteurized, the raw honey, unfiltered. That's just a purer form of honey for a better mead. Because, you know, honey, just like anything else, can be processed a lot, and you lose flavors from it. So that's it. When it comes to the honey, 3 pounds of honey per gallon. And if you can, use clover honey and try to get unprocessed, unpasteurized, raw honey. Okay, take your fruit, and at the end of this process, we want to end up with 1 pound of your fruit. So you should buy more than 1 pound, because there's going to be scrap that you're going to throw out in tidbits. Cut it up into small pieces, and be as liberal as you want. You can even dice it if you wanted. You got to be able to get it into the jug of the bottle, of the 1 gallon jug. You want to be able to fit it all in there easily. And you don't see it here in this clip, but cut against the grain. You want to release as much fruit flavor as possible, and cutting against the grain does that. So don't be easy with the fruit. And then take your pound of cut fruit and put it in plastic freezer bags. And that means put it in the freezer. So what happens is we're going to freeze it overnight, so your fruit gets nice and frozen. What happens there is that the molecules are actually ruptured. The freezing process causes crystals that cut the cells and break it all open, and which is great, and that releases flavor. And then, you know, once it's all frozen and you're ready to make your mead, now it's time. Today we're making our mead. Either use a rolling pin on it or some kind of a mallet or something and break it up even further. For 2 reasons. You're breaking it up so it's easier to handle and get into the jug, and also to further break up the molecules so they release their flavor. Now, I was pretty rough on those freezer bags, so and also you'll see why in a second. Put the fruit in new freezer bags that don't have potential holes or rips in them. And, you know, you could come up with other ways to do this, but this is just, you know, you watch this whole video, you get a pretty good understanding of what to do. So now we're going to heat up some water. Get yourself a big pan of water like this. And I'm not sure how much I got in there, about 1/2 gallon of water, roughly 3 quarts, maybe. And we're going to do a couple of things with that pan of water. First, we are going to do something called activating the yeast. And I am using Lalvin K1 V1116 yeast. And always check the expiration date in the yeast. And it usually comes with directions on how to activate it, like that. And I'm using the K1 V116, and I recommend it for this because it's a very aggressive yeast. It starts out, it gets off to a really good start when fermenting. And I'll explain a little bit more about why we want to do that. But yeast is dried, it's dormant, and we want to activate it, and we do that in the case of this yeast by heating up some water between 104 and 109 degrees. Those are the directions that came with the yeast. And we take about a half a cup of it. So it's warm water, not hot. And we add our yeast to it and then gently stir it. And then we can set this aside. So that's how we're activating our yeast there. It's kind of like it takes it out of its dormancy and brings it back to life before we pitch it into our mead. So now this is why we had such a big pan, and this is why we put the strawberries in new plastic bags. So lower the heat on that, nice and low, and put your honey and your bags of fruit in the water. We want to warm up the honey so it's very easy to pour and flow. See? And now pour it in your 1 gallon jug. Pour it all 3 pounds of it, which ends up to be 3 pounds is just about a quart. So, and the reason for the heating of the honey isn't pasteurization or anything like that. We want to make it easy to flow, easy to handle, and we want it to mix easily with the water. So now pour spring water in your jug to around half full. Doesn't matter too much, half to 3/4 full. You need to leave room for your fruit, that's the thing. And then shake it up vigorously. Keep shaking it, shake it some more. We want the mixture of honey and water to be homogeneous. If it doesn't mix well, you could get something called stratification, where later on the honey and the water separate. So mix it up really well, shake it, and shake it some more. And then add your fruit. And, do it any way you want. You can just go ahead and put the pieces in the jug directly, or use a funnel like I'll show you right here. Use a funnel and kind of mash it through and get it in there. There we go. So now you see why we only filled it half with water, just so we had enough room for our fruit. And now top it off with more spring water. And I wanted to show you something here. You want to get it pretty full. Like this is okay, that space there, that amount of space. And I'm going to actually add a little bit more water. But the big thing is, the more water the better. But the big thing is when it starts fermenting, especially with fruit in it, it's possible for it to bubble up and make a mess and clog up your airlock. So you do want to leave some airspace up there, kind of so the fruit and the bubbles and everything will settle, not get stuck in your airlock. And then you've added your fruit, you have more water, everything's good, the honey, everything's good. Shake it up again. Mix it up. And we're looking for no stratification, right? You don't want to see any separation of honey and water. And at this point, you can still be very vigorous with it, and that's okay. It will help to further release the flavor of the fruit. So now it's been 15 or 20 minutes or so since we activated our yeast, and you can see, although in this video you can't see it too well, the yeast is starting to get, there's activity happening. There's bubbling and there's fizzling, small amounts of fizzling and bubbling. That means the yeast is coming alive. So now we do something called pitching it. Pitch that yeast into your jug. And that's it. You have made mead. I'll show you a little bit more. Now gently, and don't be rough with it, just gently stir it around just to distribute the yeast around in the jug. Fill your airlock half full with water and put it on top, and that's that. Now set that container in a dark place. Stay away from sunlight and keep it at room temperature. And that's it. So now we've learned some things. If the fruit process, the whole thing, you can use a fermentation pail like I have here. What's that, a 2-gallon fermentation pail? Which is great for fruits. But I used the jug because I wanted to keep an eye on things. I wanted to show you how it all looked. We'll be able to monitor its progress as it goes.
Oh,
we've made our mead. And now if you want to go on further with this, right, you know, there's more to be done, like racking. In 2 weeks, you would rack it into a new container. And then further down the line, you would bottle it. I have more videos at the end of this video. I'll show you those videos so you can learn the full process of mead making if you want to. This video is just all about getting flavor out of your mead. Let me review. First off, use a clover honey because it's milder and gentler. It won't clash as much or overpower the flavor of the fruit that you choose. Second, cut up your fruit into small pieces and be conscious of breaking open the cells, going against the grain to release as much flavor as you can. That's the point of the cutting. And make it small enough to fit in the jug if you're not using a fermentation pail. Freeze the fruit. Put it in the freezer and freeze it right up, because what happens is it causes ice crystals that rupture the cells in the fruit and releases all that flavor. And put the fruit in right away, which is something I generally don't advocate. I usually like to add fruit to mead 2 weeks later because, let me describe it, because it's safer, particularly for beginners. What happens is when you start fermenting mead with no fruit, it builds up alcohol, and alcohol discourages bacteria growth, unwanted bacteria. So if you let it ferment and get a certain percentage of alcohol for a couple of weeks, when you put the fruit in there, you have very little risk of contamination. Because the alcohol is like an antiseptic. It will kill any wild yeasts. But in the case of how we combat that, in the case of this mead, when we put the fruit in right away, we combat that by using Lalvin K1, what's the name of it? KV1, let me look it up. I use the Lalvin yeast that is very aggressive. It gets off to a very fast start. So the yeast takes over quicker than any wild or unwanted bacteria. K1V11, that's it, I'm trying to think. Yeast. And, you know, that's optional, but that's how I combat adding the fruit right away. Okay, so a couple more things. We're going to take a look at this batch 4 hours and 12 hours later. I thought you might like to see that. And also I wanted to speak to one more thing, and that's pectin. Pectin is like this, it's kind of like a polymer almost. It's kind of like a gel, and it's actually used to make gelatins. And it comes in fruits. Some fruits have a lot of it. Some fruits have a small amount. Apples and pears and plums oranges have a lot of pectin. And strawberries and grapes and cherries only have a little bit of pectin, but it can cause cloudiness in your mead. So if you want to clear up your mead, you're having trouble clearing up your mead over the course of time, you might want to consider something called a pectic enzyme. It's really inexpensive. You just add it to the mead. I probably won't need it in this batch, but let's take a look. 4 hours later, remember what I was talking about, how we need some headspace in the top of that jug because of overflow? Well, there you go. And 4 hours later, I checked on it, and it did overflow. So I took the airlock off, tried to clear the airway, right? See it? Look at the buzz, bubbling and fizzling. Isn't that great? And then I washed and cleaned that airlock and put it back on. And I actually did this process one more time a few hours later, and I drained a little bit of fluid out of the jug because it still seemed to keep clogging, and that's okay. But let's take a look. So here you go. Here's that cleaned airlock put back on. So monitor it, particularly within the first 24 hours, and because you may get that. It's just kind of going to happen. The jug, the fruits clog things up, and it ends up coughing up stuff into the airlock. And so let's take a look 12 hours later after I had cleaned it one more time and drained a little bit of fluid out of it. And there we go, but it looks really good. There's no stratification. Everything looks clean and nice. It's bubbling very nicely. And that Lalvin yeast is off to a great start. 12 hours later, we already get some bubbling like once every, I think that's like 7 or 8 seconds, but that'll get really aggressive. Thanks for watching. Lots more mead making stuff on my website, stormthecastle.com. And here on my YouTube channel, I have a playlist with all my mead making videos. If you're going to make some mead, have some fun with it and send me pictures. I'd love to hear about it.
Thanks for watching that video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you're a subscriber, thanks for subscribing to my channel. If you're not a subscriber, hit that button. I always have lots of fun and interesting and very creative projects. I do 2 new ones every week. As an example, here's a couple more videos you might want to watch.